Hey everybody.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Another video podcast from Alex and Jonathan here at Integrative Bodywork for the Manual Therapist. Today, in particular here, we wanted to cover the topic of body mechanics. Now, clearly, for those of you that have been to our classes, we really dial into the specifics of body mechanics. That is not what today's podcast is about. We're going to take a general overview and look at some of the nuances and maybe some of the subtext of body mechanics and why it's so important. And my partner Alex just felt really passionate about us making sure that this podcast got done. So I am going to turn it over to him to start this and interject some thoughts along the way. So it's all you, Alex.
Yeah, and the week leading up to this podcast, my passion was inspired by my pain.
Yeah.
Really, I was thinking about my own personal body mechanics and the questions that people always ask me. I think I was working with a therapist who, was also struggling with body mechanics. And we had a brief discussion about that it's not necessarily about finding this place. I think when I first started in the field, there was this sense of like, oh, you just have to do these three things.
Yeah.
And then you'll never have to work again because
Yes.
you're gonna be so pain free. It's gonna be all good things will happen.
Right.
That just has not been my experience, and I don't think that's been most people's experience.
I don't
with
think
body
it is
mechanics.
either.
There is a sense of I hate to use the word struggle, but
Yeah.
I feel like there is
Yeah.
a constant struggle. There's a constant need to adjust and be aware and mindful about how what techniques I'm using, what choices of tools I'm using.
Right.
And I just feel like as we all have our own predispositions, and I think that working with your own body mechanics is about figuring out what your mechanics are, what your default is, like what your body wants to do, how your body wants to structure, because my body wants to do this.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's years of competitive swimming or what has made me so upper body, shoulder dominant. I'm sure there's a multitude of factors that go into it. But that is the thing that I always default into, and I always have to catch myself in that moment. And it's like a daily, hourly meditation. As I work, there's a sense of oh no, my mind has wandered. I'm coming back, resettling myself in my core.
Yeah.
Not this upper pole area, and finding the way to do that. And there's also I watched a video with Till a little bit ago, and I just seeing how he works. Everybody has got a different way that they structure their body, that they structure, how they do what they do.
Right.
And there was just a moment I still have that image in my head of seeing him and the way he held his body and leaned in with just the minimal amount of effort in that moment. And finding little images like that for me has been really helpful. That I can what. How would Till approach this?
Really.
How would this other teacher might approach this?
Yeah.
There's and everybody's got their own angle and predisposition to it, but whether it's right arm use, I think, or dominant arm use, I should say, is the other thing that I hear a lot of people dealing with. And I went through a period where I'm still striving to be ambidextrous in everything I do, and
I've gotten good at that.
I notice it with being in the wood shop even and sanding certain ways, and I always have a preference to use the right arm for certain tasks. Yes. For mobile, dexterous tasks. But then the left arm is really good at stabilizing things. So I had to relearn how to stabilize things. And it's the same thing on the table and working. And I have to figure out, wait, okay, if I'm on this side of my client, this is the best mechanical way to address this with my right arm in this sort of nature. Right. If I switch to the other side, I will notice I will always want to use my right arm and twist my body in some weird contorted way so that I could use my right arm to do the same thing. And it was you know what? I just need to, how do I settle into this? And what do I need to learn and focus on and do? And just take the 2 or 3 weeks that it will take, to develop that sense. When I kneel down, I always kneel down with one leg. I always do the right leg first. And I had to really teach myself for a while, whenever I knelt down, to do the other leg. Now I actually can't remember which one is my dominant one because I'm constantly switching
it up, huh?
So I don't know. It's definitely, I feel like I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but there's a sense of trying to build a case for mindful awareness.
That's
just being present with your structure and being with how it functions, with both the good and the bad.
Yeah, now you're getting into it. Because I think that's what you were driving at in a sense. And if you hadn't found your way back to that, I was going to encapsulate Alex's little thought here is about mindfulness. Because ultimately, I mean, listen, we spend so much time being client-center focused that we tend to maybe not really think about us in that way. Yes, we do think about what we're doing. And yes, we sort of think about the tool aspect of it, like, this would be better to get in this way, which is clearly a part of body mechanics, but not what I think, Alex is driving at here in terms of, hey, first of all, things change over the years. Both Alex and I have been practicing almost 20 years. Some of those things change in terms of what we're doing. Yeah. Also, to be honest with you, something that chimed into my head while Alex was talking, I think I have to reinitiate sometimes in the middle of my day. This isn't the same client anymore. Maybe I have to really think differently about what I'm doing for me versus what I'm doing for them. And then I think the third thing that Alex touched on that's essential is that process of learning, and where a little bit of that frustration or the easy sort of default comes from, like, I can't figure this out right now, or I'm not even present enough to know that I'm so deep in my habit that I'm back to swimming again.
Forget this. I'm just gonna get through this client. Just get through the day. Just get through.
Right.
It's easy to get caught into that for sure.
The other thing, and Alex sort of touched on it too, and so I do practice other things to be ambidextrous, not necessarily at the table. My computer mouse is set up on the left side. I try to eat with my left hand. I try to get some more movement that wouldn't necessarily be there at other times, so that when I do have to make those changes and do find myself cranking around in a way, I'm way more familiar with what the feel of this is, because I am clearly right-hand dominant in that way too. So, yeah, and I think in the sense of what we focus on when we work, I'm positive that my problem-solving skills are at the front of my brain versus what is my shoulder doing right now? And that definitely, again, there's always some give and take in that. So Alex used the word struggle. I think it is a little bit, because maintaining focus for 8 hours a day in that fashion, you might even think you're focusing and you're not, because of that sense of it becomes the default. So, yeah. I mean, you put out a good point. The other thing we wanted to talk about here in particular too, one of the difference between Alex and I's practice is that Alex has a table that's static. I have a hydraulic table. I think it has made such a huge difference, not only in what I'm able to do with the tables, but definitely my body mechanics, because I can go from that real low setting where I'm working some of the posterior vertebrae and ribs, raise you up higher and get into the cervicals now without having to worry about it. Because when I heard about it in school, I was like, I don't really need that. Or, it might be nice to set the client, for height for the table for who's coming in. But it's really a tool now, and a valuable tool for me in terms of changing that dynamic. So, and you and I have been talking about it.
Well, I mean, for years we both had, regular static tables. And, it was a matter of like, where do you set your table at? We'd bring our tables to workshops and be like, that's one peg lower than mine. I mean, I'll have to try that out. Yeah. Because I remember, it was like, how do you deal with a table? Do you up or lower it, between sessions and things like this? I've definitely... I've worked with a lot of people at workshops where, they're really struggling with the technique. Like, how do I get into this? And it's like, well, your table is about 6 inches too high for this particular technique, for this particular client. Yeah. Like, I'll be like, lower your table and you'll be good to go. And then I leave to deal with the next group. I come back, they're still struggling with that too high table. I'm like, no, really? Like, get off the table. Yes, let's take 30 seconds. Yes. If all three of us are moving this, we'll have it, so there's a sense of how long is it really going to take to make a small adjustment if you do know you have a client coming in who is just larger, or you're going to be doing
or going
a
from
lot
a
of
small
sideline
to
work.
yes.
Sideline work is one of those things that, because I do a lot of sideline work, I have just defaulted to keeping my table at the lower end of what I can work with well, and then I just know that when I'm doing lower work, when the client is face down and I really need to dig in, that I'm not doing the lording over them and trying to glare through the tissue to get it to let go. That it's sort of no, there's a way I can use, spread the legs, use some more yoga type stances. There's been a lot of times where I've come out of sessions like that where I've been like, wow, I feel like I just had half an hour of yoga practice too. Because you do learn to use your legs a little differently when you keep your body lower.
Yeah, it's funny because while we're sort of in the table discussion in terms of body mechanics, I distinctly remember also being in school, and one of the instructors, it was 6 tables. Six tables were in the back of the room. One was set at its highest, one was set in the middle, one was set at the lowest. I know this sounds a little like Three Bears in the Porridge, but it wasn't really so much about table height in the way that we're discussing it now. It was to really make you think about where some of your leverage might be coming from, what you're doing to create, force for the techniques. And I am almost positive that one of the required things that we were to explore was jostling at that table height. And somebody in my class was very small, and it really looked little kiddish in the sense of that's what it was. And the table started even getting a little wobbly in that moment. And so, it's funny that you think about these things years later. But it definitely made me think about some things, and I think that's what I'm experiencing maybe with the hydraulic table, where it's better both for me, for my client, and then why am I raising this, or why am I lowering this, or what is it I'm going to be doing? So my intention fits into that a lot.
I have also been to several sessions where there is a hydraulic table, and I never hear it go up and down. I never feel it go up and down, as in the therapist is just leaving it at the same height, which is always interesting to me. I mean, granted, maybe it was just the dynamics of what they were doing in that session, but I was thinking, I'm like, no, I've been face down, I've been on my side, I've been all different, and they never changed maybe that works for them.
How interesting.
But there is a sense too of I know with the pedals, because I am researching, because when I grow up, I want to have a hydraulic table. It's going to make these things a little difficult, though, to have to roll a table around. But anyway. But there's a sense of, I realize on some tables, there's levers on both sides, so wherever you are, you can just tap the thing up and down. And some of them, there's just a push switch where you'd have to go.
That's where
you'd actually have to walk to the other side of the table. And move it up, and I think there is a sense of laziness that is like, oh, I don't want to have to go over and do that, and I'm saying that from personal experience, not necessarily as a dig against other people, because I feel like laziness, fundamentally is, we all have our patterns, we all have our things that we fall into, and definitely in those moments, there's a sense of oh, I just want to get this technique done because I really want to move on to the next 3 techniques because that's really what this is about. Just get through this and move on. And that is a part of that mindful awareness of catching myself. And there's even a sense of the posture that we have, because we do have to posture differently. We are using our body weight more than our strength. And I think that even in the shift of that physical change in how we posture, where we're putting our weight, there's a mental shift that goes with that, because if I'm in this place, I'm in the place of bearing into tissue and I must make change. Right, exactly. And if I come at it from a perspective of lifting through the chest and anchoring through the spine, I just suddenly feel a little less rushed. We'll get to this.
That's the other.
We'll take some time. We'll hang out.
Right.
And this will release when it's ready to release. And and that's okay. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah. No, it's a really interesting.
It speaks to the bigger thing here of, we're talking about body mechanics. How we are in our body really impacts how we work on other people and how we interface with other people.
That's what I
remember that there was an exercise that we did back in KMI where it was about perception, and it was about transference through the lines, and the person was working on my right or on my like anterior compartment of the leg, which, if you know your anatomy trains, it's the front line runs from the front of the foot through the quads, through the chest, up basically through the neck into the head. So they were working down there, and they were doing this thing, really bearing down and just trying to shift tissue and make change. And at some point, Tom Myers, who runs the thing, came over and quietly was sort of like, at some point, I want you to just randomly lift up your head. Don't even lift it hard, just barely, move to lift it up off the table. Right. And then he went over and he did a thing about perception and bearing down, how we posture makes a difference in what we perceive. Right. That's And he was like, do you feel the change? Do you feel this tissue? Do you feel this layer? And it was like, no. I'm just, I'm pushing. And so at one point in all of that, I did what I was told to do. I barely lifted my head. And immediately the therapist was like, oh, I felt that change. And it was just the little bit of tension that came through that whole front line. They were now able to feel it because they were coming from a calmer, sort of more perceptive place. They weren't trying to muscle through the tissue. Right. So, I think we had a video about assessment where we talked about, you're always assessing. No matter what you're doing, you're grabbing tissue, you're moving, any technique you do, you're assessing as you do that. So it speaks to that too. And if you're assessing from a place of a little bit more calm introspection, kind of a thing, then I think you're going to pick up a lot more than if you're approaching it from the sense of I'm struggling because I'm maxing my force out and I'm using too much muscle effort and whatnot. There's so much to respond to in there, but I'm going to go backwards with it then in the sense of
that was a lot. Presence. No, I think you just make some good points that need the sense of being flushed out, maybe not even necessarily agreed with, even though I do. Yeah, because again, presence, right? We think about presence for our clients and being available to them, and but presence starts here. If I'm not here for me, how can I be here for anybody else type of thing? And I don't want to, go too far. You know what, though? It made me think of when we were you're talking about moving the pedal around on the floor. I got to tell you, now at this point, I don't even really notice it in the way of I got to get up and go to the other side of the table.
It's just like an automatic.
It is, and maybe even now, knowing that I have this tool available, as I start to think about, I got to get to these next 3 techniques, there's a little bit of forethought in, here's where I'll break and move the table to support those 3 techniques. But that's become out of habit. And then what I really thought of was, how many times have I told you all to move your client because they don't care? Stand them on their heads. If you're going to be successful with that technique, they would do anything for you. And I think I really realized in the sense of what we're
up today too. So
move the table, dummy. You've got that. They don't care. They want you to be successful. It's going to take 10 seconds, if that, to resituate this whole thing. So just get up and do it.
There's an interesting sense we have as therapists about inconveniencing our
that's
client.
right.
But I don't want to have them flip over too many times. And granted, there are definitely occasions when your client is in pain and it really hurts them to move. So you want to engineer it so you don't have to move them so much. But most clients are able to move fine. I remember the first session of Rolfing I ever had. I don't think I was in one position for more than 2 techniques before I was like, okay, on your side. Right. All right, now flip face up.
I've had those sessions.
And coming from the world of massage where it was more about, it was a little bit about, inconvenience. I'm so sorry, you're going to have to flip now. Hold the sheet. That's kind of how we were taught a little bit. And coming from that world into this world of you're just lying on the table in your underwear for assessment for work, or athletic wear or whatever it might be, and that's how you worked, because you could then flip from one side and then flip to the other and then stand up for an assessment and then back to the table for 3 or 4 more things, stand up again for another assessment. How is that? Is that working? Is it not working? It really kind of blew my mind that one could work that way.
For sure.
That it was okay for a massage therapist to work that way. Right. And that's kind of in the period where I was, I think, making the mental transition from being a massage therapist to a structural integrator to an integrated body worker. And that was one of the big mental shifts that I had to make. And I remember going to KMI a couple of years after that and seeing the same shift happen in everybody else as they were students, and realizing, oh, there's a different way of doing this. I can move my client. I have the freedom. I have the freedom to move my client on the table and to choose different positions. So, and even if I know like some of our students have issues because the dynamics of their specific work environment,
the setting that they're working in.
They may have to have a drape on. You can still have them flip around and do a bunch of stuff.
You definitely
can. I remember in that transition period between being a massage therapist and being a structural integrator, I had experimented a lot with like, well, how could I drape this specific technique so that I could have this person on the side and not have them exposed? I don't know. I feel like, table height and type, but also client height.
The size of clients,
whatever, have your clients move around. It really can make a huge difference in how you interface with in the mechanics you choose and how you interface with stuff. Well, like I said, I just watched that video with Till.
That's right.
And he did almost all of his back work in the sideline position, and it was just like oh yeah, I know all these things. Like why do I just continually put my client face down for this work when I can put the sideline? It gives me a lot more freedom to choose different angles that I wouldn't be able to choose well if I was having the client face down.
For sure.
So a lot of the techniques I choose are based upon what tool do I have. What's the best angle for that tool? What's the best angle to interface with that? And so there's a sense of, sideline would probably be the best for that. So then I can kind of engineer, okay, the next few things are sideline, but I really do need them face down for this other angle because I can come out. So, you just kind of engineer your sessions, and it starts to look less, I think, flowy. But in the end, when the client stands up, they can stand better and breathe better and move more freely. Like they're not going to care if they had to flip 20 times. I mean, they might gripe in the moment, but if they're walking out of here, smoother, easier, more freedom, less pain. Kind of like you said, like if this is going to help me, sure, I'll flip over, I'll do that, I'll stand on my head and sing the Star Spangled Banner.
I think even in the sense of that transitional phase for me too, when I started, getting other people interested in what I was now versus what I was then, my big email or communication first thing was, are you sure you know who I am and what I do? And then even if they said yes, I kind of gave them the idea of the session, not just what to dress in and that posture's a part of this, but that blissful, sleepy time thoughts, they may happen in some sessions, but it's doubtful in that I may be moving you around a lot. I may need a lot of communication from you. Depends on your problem, that type of thing. So in terms of focusing the idea around body mechanics, let's sort of bring it together with listen, just like any technique or any other idea that we talk about, nothing is that static or locked in stone. I feel like body mechanics are an evolving process, and as Alex sort of said earlier, even on a daily scenario where, okay, this might be working now, but isn't going to work later, or I have to start thinking about the adaptation. The second thing that sort of came to me in terms of trying to wrap this up a little bit is that I do know, and I'm guilty of this as well, and I think you and I have had this conversation privately, in that it takes me a while once I learn a technique to own a technique. And once I own a technique, I realize there may be some better ways for me to have the same effect or do the same thing, whether it's a different client position, a different hand, a different table height. And then the third thing again here. Listen, folks, every one of you are important. You can't do the work that you do for everybody else if you're not taking care of you. And body mechanics are just a huge piece of that. And we just want to really support your growth in that area in a way that's impactful. So even though this is a lovely little video podcast, even though you've probably heard Alex and I say it 100,000 times at this point, this conversation will continue and will go on for as long as we're doing what we're doing, right?
Yeah, I just want to tack on a little bit about the evolution that it's like there's always a sense too that I had when I was younger that it was sort of like, oh, you just have to kind of like figure all this stuff out and then you'll be smooth sailing for the rest of your life.
That's where
well, yeah, that worked for about 3 years. And then my finger joints started to hurt when I turned 40. And I was like, wow, I really can't just hammer home with the finger joints on the Bodymechanics like I used to, so I had to adjust and shift my mechanics to that. You know, it's like every few years, something shifts enough that you then have to, you know, keep adapting to that. So there's a sense of that. And, you know, and I want to tack on one additional thing on the end.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you mentioned something that is sort of, I remember showing like the last session I had. It's been a few months since I've had body work, which is a long time for me. Usually it's every like 2 or 3 weeks. But just life got in the way for a while. And I remember coming in thinking, well, you know, my back could use some work, et cetera, et cetera. Like I'm not doing too bad on just the day-to-day basis, but I can really tell my mechanics when I'm working are kind of cruddy. I'm really like caught into this. So, like, you know, it's those moments of like, you may not notice walking around, you know, having pain or something like this, but if you notice your mechanics are just routinely, you're struggling with them, you're having trouble like finding the spot you need to find, like maybe it's time for you to get some work too.
I'm glad you threw this in.
That's always that mental note to me. I'm like, oh, it's time to go. I better go book a session because
can't move from a place that's not functional.
Exactly. I'm not finding my neutral right now. So my body is finding some other neutral.
Right.
All right.
Hey, that's another.
I think that probably wraps it up for today.
Yeah. We'll see you guys down the road. All right. Thanks for tuning in.
All right. Stay integrated.